Hi, folks. I'm Adrian Sanabria, the host of Enterprise Security Weekly. Every week, we interview the most interesting folks we can find, talking about the most pressing cybersecurity issues and challenges facing the enterprise today. Myself and my co-hosts have each been in the industry for decades, long enough to see the patterns in the industry and explore where trends are going. In addition to enterprise challenges, we also follow the vendor space, the most interesting security startups emerging, technology and product trends, all of the most interesting funding and acquisition announcements. Finally, we love to discuss the latest trends in tech and how they'll impact cybersecurity. If you're wondering how the latest in AI, quantum computing, cloud, and DevOps is going to impact security a few years down the road, you should follow the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. For this segment, I am joined remotely by the lovely Mandy. Mandy, welcome.
Why, thank you. I have so missed hearing some dad jokes. I'm shocked. I'm shocked you didn't already start with one.
I know. I'm light on the dad jokes lately. I'm preparing for my next big social media, queuing exercise. So I have a lot of nerd jokes, not necessarily dad jokes.
Hey, nerds and nerdery is always fantastic. It's always hot. It's always mainstream great, right?
What do Python programmers and zookeepers have in common? They both love pandas. Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. What's up, Josh?
God damn. Oh, man. Seriously? You tell that bad of a nerd joke and then go, and it's Josh time.
That's right.
I swear you do that just so you can see me bow my head and face bomb.
I do. It's one of the reasons I do it. Oh, it's nice to have you here, Josh. Mr. Aaron Leland is here with us. Aaron, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Good to see you. It's been a while. And I just noticed the camera angle's been out quite wide since we've been sort of pre-talking. Loving the full beard.
Oh,
definitely
thank you.
suits you more than the goatee.
Yeah. My wife is like, are you growing out your beard? I'm like, right now it's just laziness, and I'm kind of like playing it out and see what's going to happen.
No,
and
keep it.
And she kind of like scowled at me a little bit, which, I mean, I don't know if that was just a normal everyday scowl that you get from your wife or scowling at the beard.
I told him yesterday. I definitely vote for the beard.
It's very gray. It's very gray, though.
Of it as well. No, it's
That's perfect. Not a problem.
I mean,
the gray is not a problem.
It says
You're distinguished.
It says it says I use Arch, by the way. That's what it says.
but you do use Arch.
But I do, so it's fitting.
I don't know. You sure it doesn't look more like COBOL?
Good.
Oh, you're that. Vicious.
Might be even more gray. All right, enough of that. Kayla Williams is here with us in studio. Kayla, it's nice to have you here in studio.
It's great to be back. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody.
Kayla, what's your duties, job title at Devo?
I am the CISO here at Devo.
Nice.
I've been in the role for a little over a year and a half now. Prior to that, I was VP of GRC. There.
Fantastic. Well, it's always nice to have you in studio.
Yeah, thanks.
As we're prepping for the big SOC Analyst Appreciation Day.
Yep.
Or sad. I don't like calling it sad because it feels like it's sad, but it is sad. But it's SOC Analyst Appreciation Day.
Yeah, I know. I keep saying we need to have a new moniker for it, but what else do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have time to think about it though.
I do, because when is that?
It's in October.
We should have that in front of us, I feel like.
I know. I feel like I should have it in front of me too, and that's awful. I feel like it's October.
I feel like I forgot to read the announcements too.
18th.
You realize the pun writes itself. That acronym is
really,
sad.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so hold on. Make sure you follow Security Weekly on Twitter, or follow Sec Weekly on Twitter, which is the Twitter account for the show, live stream reminders, clips, and more. And subscribe to the Below the Surface podcast. We're recording an episode today for Eclipsium's Below the Surface podcast in partnership with CRA. I will be speaking to our Director of Threat Research, Mr. Nate Warfield. Very excited about that. I love my coworkers. My coworkers are awesome. Really lucky. And I get to do podcasts with them, too.
That's
and
awesome.
I get to do podcasts with Kayla. And all of the... I'm just really blessed today. I got 3 podcasts I'm doing today. It's great.
It's such a hard life that you live.
I know. I have to sit around and talk with really awesome people and smoke cigars and sip coffee, and maybe
tell dad
alcohol.
jokes.
And tell dad jokes. That's really, I can't complain. You know?
Yeah, no, you really can't.
When I complain, no one listens anyway. So.
Well, yeah.
Well, they listen, and then Mandy rolls her eyes, and I stop complaining.
Hey, I also scoff. There are times that I also scoff.
You do
it's
that
not
too.
always just eyes.
Yes.
Ooh, I like that. The scoff. That's a good.
I think a much harder job is being a SOC analyst or actually doing incident response.
Yeah, I would have to agree. We don't realize. I think certainly at my level across the board. Whether you're a CISO, a senior director of security, or even a CIO, not understanding the full impact of the work, the day-to-day obligations that fall to the SOC analyst, which is why Devo's created the SOC Analyst Appreciation Day. It is a long overdue shout out to the unsung heroes of an organization, and it is October 18th, 2023.
Sweet.
All day, please register. It's to say thank you to these people who probably are not always appreciated for their hard work and the stress of the job that they face.
And what's interesting? I was helping respond to an incident here in the studio, and this incident wasn't security related, but oftentimes as a SOC analyst, at least when I was doing SOC analyst kind of work, a lot of times what you're responding to, again, sometimes it was security related, sometimes it wasn't. The point is whenever stuff is going badly, that's usually where a SOC analyst comes into play, or they're looking for bad things. And I think that can really wear on you, certainly.
Oh, absolutely. And, when you have an operational outage or an operational incident, you can't assume that it's just operational. You always should be engaging with your SOC team, certainly to make sure there isn't any nefarious activity going on behind the scenes.
It was going through my brain today. I'm like, is it the network? Is the network congested? And is the network congested because someone hacked into something and is doing something? It was in the back of my mind today.
But I will say, walking into that, because I did literally walk through the front door of the studio at that time. As an incident manager, you were very calm. Your folks were calm. I mean, there was organized chaos.
Yes.
Searching through bins and knocking things over.
You saw me rummaging furiously through the bin.
But it was organized chaos. I think that's really important. And everyone was calm, knowing how critical it was to get the incident, the event, if you will.
And I think that's just I think that's just practice.
Yeah.
Really, that it is. It's just experience. That I think the first incident I was in, I probably was a lot more panicked. It's why I also like having on the team. At least one example of folks I like to have on the team, certainly not the only one, are folks that have a military background. Yes. Because it depends on what you do in the military can be very different for every person. But if you were in combat or in combat training and like there's stuff blowing up around you or bullets flying at you, when you get to an IT job, you can remain calm under pressure because it's not that level of life-threatening situations if you were in those situations. But there are also, in the military, other very stressful. I mean, everyone who goes in the military has to go through some form of boot camp, right? And that's to put you through a very stressful situation for a whole host of reasons. Mm-hmm. But if you go through that, like you said, when you come into an incident, now I didn't serve in the military, but it's just practice. Like I have to really focus on, let's just remain calm because panicking does you no good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first line responders, veterans or active duty military, absolutely. Yep. Teachers,
police
after
officers,
the pandemic, yep. Those untraditional paths into security. I think it's a great segue into that conversation that we'd had previously. It was like a couple weeks, I don't know what we talked a couple weeks ago, a month ago, I don't remember, about how we have the skills shortage, the staffing shortage, or what's perceived as one that's up for debate with a bunch of people. But, there's a lot of folks that after the pandemic now are wanting to transfer into security. And I think as hiring managers, we have an obligation to not only look at the job descriptions that we're posting and making sure that, is this a jack of all trades? If Kayla's doing all of these things, maybe we need 3 people versus 1. But also making sure that you're not inadvertently putting barriers to entry in and getting those people who have that experience, that frontline first responder.
Healthcare workers too, you're right. But I also feel my wife works in healthcare, and I don't want to say you shouldn't go into healthcare because they have a huge shortage in healthcare right now. And that's like super important as well. I mean, what we do is important, but Also, when we get sick, all of us are going to go to a hospital
Right.
at some point. And if there's not enough people to take care of all the people going to the hospital, that's a really bad scene. And it's kind of where we are today.
Yeah. And that's a global issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I want to encourage people, like, get into information security, but also consider healthcare too, please, because we need people in that field. And what I tell my wife is very similar to what I recommend we do in cybersecurity is we need a recruitment effort, like an organized recruitment effort for cybersecurity, for healthcare, to get people re-engaged or engaged with becoming a professional in these fields, right? And I think it looks different between healthcare and cybersecurity in some respects. A lot of respects, it's the same. A lot of it is education about what it is we actually do, and allowing people to learn that. But there's a lot that goes into it. But we need to, I guess my point is we need to put effort into it, right?
Oh, for sure. It's interesting, the complementary skill sets conversation. Just a few weeks ago, I presented at Blue Team Con on this very topic and how we could get more people into our field, and how it's a concerted effort between the HR teams and the hiring managers, in recognizing what are the soft skills that are needed to move into this field, and how that ties in with what you were mentioning before about like incident response. There's a story that I told about a friend of mine who hired a former bus driver from one of the cities. And they hired this individual because they had experience writing really detailed incident response reports, having dealt with some issues on the bus. And
Today, Johnny threw up on the bus.
more like the day the drunk person physically assaulted me and I had to keep my cool type of stuff, right?
Oh
I mean,
my
obviously,
God.
like cleaning
Yeah.
up those things, yes, but having to stay cool, calm, collected, or if there's been a car accident with passengers on the bus and having to deal with that, there's a lot more to that than you think. And this person didn't even want to apply for the role, but got encouraged by my colleague, and they got it. They passed with flying colors through all the stages of the interview because they understood the need to be patient, calm, and were able to discuss those complementary skills and how they fit the role's needs. So they kind of read between the lines, which I think could be a failure with some of the ways that we have traditionally written our roles. We only talk about technical skills, hard skills, versus those soft skills that are needed to really succeed. I think we all can relate to that.
I'm going to totally agree with you. I used to teach forensics, and I'm an ex-cop as well. And everybody in the forensics groups and classes that I taught who was ex-military, when they're like, well, what level of detail do we need? I'm like, what would your sergeant say? And they'd be like, oh, and they'd like, their level of detail became infinite, and anybody who has to write incident reports and their job depends on it, they understand, and they will shut up, sit down, and start typing. And when they're done, it's going to be step for step, word for word, line for line, hex edit for hex edit, what happened. And it's amazing. And taking account of that in the job descriptions, what other jobs, what other fields are complementary, I think is the word used, which is, makes sense, work with whatever we're doing, whether it's incident response, SOC, whether it's forensics, there's a lot of our field that relies on the documentation and the presentation and visualization of information rather than the breakthrough inspiration of finding it. Okay? Yeah. There are methodical jobs that methodical people don't need to be inspired and massively hacker talented to do the job properly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things I think I've realized being in this role for the past year and a half is, I am not a technical person. I graduated with a degree in accounting. I have a master's in project management of all things, but I worked in external and internal audit and made my way through enterprise risk management, program management, and into what now is GRC. At the time, it didn't have that moniker, that acronym to it. But then coming up that side, and now with all the changes that you're seeing in the last 5 years because of GDPR and privacy laws all over the world, you have to be able to pivot and build a security program that allows you to do that. And I think the complementary skill set piece is absolutely becoming more paramount nowadays than it was in the past. And that's why we need the diversity of thought in the SOC, because to your point, it's not just eyes on glass and making sure that you're able to technically address something. It's how do you document it? How do you have to report to your regulators? What level of detail do you have? What about customer response and things like that? So it's bigger than a breadbasket.
I'm also going to state that it's more important to the people that run security and GRC and compliance and audit and everything else, because if we don't have people that can explain it to the business, we don't get the budget to do it.
Absolutely.
So,
100%.
while the skills to be a hacker, to be a pen tester, to be a whatever are still incredibly important, I'm not discounting that at all. But if you can't explain it to the business, you don't get the budget next year to do it again.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think there's always been a debate, certainly in the past 20 years, about technical level of skill to be in cybersecurity. And I just want to put that in context and add a little color to that, because I do think that there is some technical skills that you need. And I think technical skills may be the wrong term, but we need to define what those are. There's like technical skills like I need to know how to program, I need to know how to reverse engineer things, I need to know, how hardware and firmware work. Those are like deep technical skills. Come back on the spectrum though. So the example I use is I put a lot of content out on social media, and some of my neighbors and friends and stuff will be like, I had no idea what you were talking about. And it's like, okay, well, you need some technical skills to be able to understand the terminology and the context around what you're doing. And there's all kinds of levels within there. So I think there are minimum technical skills, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
Like my example always in healthcare is, if you're going in healthcare, you got to take a class that teaches you all the terminology that's used in healthcare, right? Because you got to know some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. That's a very fair statement. I got my experience in like boots on ground working in security consultancy, like learning the acronyms, learning.
And I don't care how you got those skills.
Right.
If you can come and have a conversation with me at the right level, and you talk and we understand each other, and I'm not talking super technical, I'm just talking IT. A lot of it revolves around IT terms, and you understand what those mean, even if you have to ask questions like what one of those are. That scores more points to me than obviously if you just nod your head, but you didn't know what that acronym. Mandy and I do that all the time. I'm like, Mandy, I don't know what that acronym means. We were doing that yesterday. I'm like, hey, It's like, wait, you got to.
This guy said this acronym, and I don't know what in the world he was talking about.
Yeah, and acronyms get overloaded and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's an important skill in of itself. But there is a minimum body of or different bodies of knowledge depending on your role. Right.
Like I think that the security function as a whole, especially when you're talking about like leadership, it's more about the EQ and the ability to lead a team than it is about writing code. Like I've never written a line of code in my life. Actually, no, that's not true. I did it on a training thing forever ago, and it was horrendous. It's not a skill set that I possess.
Some people just don't like doing it. Yeah.
But it's not something that I'm going to do every day. But if you have a CISO or someone above a director level that's coding, then you've got a problem anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, I find also people in some of those roles, they do have a technical background, and they'll do it as kind of like a hobby because they like doing it. Yeah. But in their professional career, they're like, I want to do the CISO role. So I think there are varying levels of technical level. Like you can take CISOs, for example. Right. I always get along with because I can nerd out with CISOs and talk security if they are technical, right? So I like the technical CISO. Those are the ones that would more like listen to my show, like the Paul Security Weekly show, for example, right? Yeah. But I find the other camps maybe gravitate towards Business Security Weekly, and it's totally fine. Like it's not a knock on anyone. There's just people have different paths, like you said, to get into this field. Oh, so my analogy with this recently in my own life is, Aaron, did you know that I'm coaching soccer now?
Yes, I've heard about it. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, people find out about this, which kind of I've not been comfortable enough to coach soccer. Speaking of the minimum body of knowledge, right, required, I'm like, I played the sport like when I was 7 for like one season, and I've not been into soccer, and I haven't been comfortable like helping out with soccer. My middle son plays competitive soccer and plays all year round, all the camps, all the things, and does that's what he does. But I've watched him I reached a point where I watched him so much, and I listened to what the coach would say to him, especially in competitive soccer, that like through osmosis, I'm like, I can coach. So my middle son goes, I want you to you're going to assistant coach on a team. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you don't know anything about soccer. I'm like, all right, quiz me. So he sits me down. Get this, Aaron. Mm-hmm. He sits me down, looks me right in the eye and goes, why do you want to be an assistant coach, Dad? Like, what is this, an interview? And then he asked some, like, technical soccer questions, and I'm answering him. He's like, where'd you learn all that? I'm like, I've watched over 100 of your games, and I've listened to what your coach says, so now I've got an understanding. Like, also, last night I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I read the rules.
Right. So you got to make me a promise now. There's a TV series, I don't know if it's out in America, called Ted Lasso. And Ted Lasso is an American who's never coached soccer.
Oh,
it's on Apple TV. It's really good.
It's great.
Yeah, and I think what we can take away from it to wrap it into the story is that maybe you can bring something to soccer that nobody else that's been embedded in soccer or football for their whole lives can see. So you might have a new perspective.
Right. But just like in incident response, you draw on what skills and experiences you have. So I was a martial arts instructor, and I did a lot of instruction for kids as well. In fact, I don't think he charged me if I helped teach the kids class. My instructor was like, you don't have to pay the membership fee.
Nice.
I'm like, okay, that's cool. Boy, was that hard. We talked about like 6-year-old, boys and girls playing soccer, same thing, and you're just hurting right at that point. So I'm coaching my first soccer game, assistant coaching, which was really like a tryout for me. I'm like, I'm just trying out as a coach, like that's what I told the kids. And one of the kids came off the field and he's like, my hip kind of hurts. And I'm like, I said, I think it's your hip flexor. I'm like, get down on one knee and then arch your back this way. And the head coach looks at me and is like, well, you're hired. I'm like, I know this from martial arts. Like hip flexor you would have all the time. I'm like, I know the stretch because I did that for so long. And so
that's
I
his
think
YouTube channel,
but it's the
by the way.
thing. When we go into
soccer stretches and soccer stretches and martial art kicks is
right.
Paul's other YouTube channel, just to be clear.
That's right. Yes, I can show you all about that. You can subscribe. It's great. But like going into incident response, it's a similar kind of thing. But also knowing
what, fake it till you make it? Is that this similar kind of thing?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing with soccer. I'm faking it till I make it, Josh. Yes. But drawing on your previous skills and experiences, but also as an incident commander, I feel like you should have some of that knowledge of your team to know what experiences and background your team has, right? In this sense, Paul taught martial arts, so if a kid has a cramp or whatever, like ask Paul what we do to help the kid out, right? In incident response, it could be like, oh, I know Kayla worked in like SAP or worked in accounting, and then there's this accounting system that is part of this incident. I want to pull Kayla into that incident, right?
Yeah, and I also think that kind of dovetails into overall well-being for a SOC analyst or really anybody in the security field, right? Like, we don't get up and move enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's also yes.
One of the things that if you follow me on LinkedIn that I was posting about before, I have thyroid issues, and I had during COVID I had an ultrasound done, and on my thyroid because I have a nodule, and I remember saying, it's like physical care is self-care, like your physical well-being is mental well-being. It all ties in together. And after like all of that, it started to become something I started preaching a lot more. Is like, I just sit in front of a screen all day, and then I go off of like my work hours, but my phone was always by my side because what if there's an incident? And I'm always on. I never really turn it off, and it led to burnout and exhaustion. Back in July, I messaged my manager and I was like, I am taking next week off. I am burnt out. I didn't even like who I was. Like, I was yelling at my kids. I was yelling at my husband. I was just not being a good friend, not a good person because I was so, and that week was fantastic. My boss was like, yep, just take the time, go ahead. And it helped so much. And just reaching the point where I knew I had to step away was hard as well. Especially in this role, and thinking SOC analysts and incident managers know it's very difficult to say, you know what, it's okay. Someone else can be my eyes and ears for this time. Even if it's a day, you feel that guilt. Yeah,
it's important to get out and do things. I mean, I have three very busy boys, so when we take vacation, we're going off and doing things, and it's fantastic. I mean, this summer I was. We did paddle boarding, and we did a water park. We did zip lining, the whitewater rafting. We did all kinds of stuff like that, it's great to just, it's good because that stuff doesn't involve technology or sitting behind a keyboard. Whereas one of my hobbies is, you can tell like the gear sitting here and stuff is to do more computer nerd stuff. So it's good to get out and take some time off and go do something not technology related. Aaron.
Hi, thanks, Paul. It's just I have a real burning question. I've got about like 20 really intelligent questions, but the one that keeps coming to the top is obviously to Kayla. Is it more stressful to be a CISO of a SIEM company because you do security and what if you got hacked? And also within 2023, Joseph Sullivan obviously getting 3 years probation and 200 hours of community service. Yep. If it all goes wrong, you could go to jail. Is this adding to the stress you were talking about?
Absolutely. I would be lying if I said that it didn't cause me concern and pause, making sure, I think the first piece of advice I would give to anybody that's CISO currently or thinking of moving into that role is make sure you're on the insurance, like that you are a named person just for your own protection. And a lot of the CISO groups that I'm in, we've actually been talking about getting your own personal coverage. Like, do you need to have your own personal,
like an umbrella policy?
Yeah, and that is certainly a concern. And then for me, being a vendor CISO at a SIEM company, it is a concern because not only are we seeing our own traffic, there's some instances where we'll see a connection somewhere and we'll go, oh, why is this customer sending data here? Mm-hmm. Or why is this data coming in? Where's it coming from? And then, getting legal involved and the customers. And, the customers always appreciate when you're proactive, of course, because nobody wants to be MGM right now, right? Or insert any other company name here. But it is certainly an obligation, and it's a fiduciary responsibility that I think if you don't work in security or a second line of defense role, like legal, procurement, or risk, you don't fully understand what that weight is. Self-inflicted or not, you definitely worry. And I do find that to be very stressful, for sure.
Hey, Kayla, do you know what the other job title of a CISO is?
No, what is it?
Designated scapegoat.
That's just so depressing. But you're not wrong. No, CISOs are blamed a lot for things. I think it was in Joe's case where they were like, okay, Joe took certain actions, and I'm not trying to speak on his behalf or anybody else who's involved, but what about the CEO? It's not just a CISO's decision. It is a business decision. And if the business is accepting certain risk and it's being documented that I said this on this day and this decision was contrary to my, direction or suggestion, who then is actually liable? That depends on who you talk to, apparently.
Right. It depends on the situation. There's so many factors that play into that. Yeah. But I think you're right. The events that have transpired in recent times is a cause for concern and potential action and protection for yourself, right, in that role. And unfortunately, stress, too. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the folks that work in the SOC on the first line there in terms of, eyes on glass, they're seeing things and they're going to want to react as quickly as they can, but then they're sometimes stymied by decisions up the chain, and that has an impact on their morale and what they're feeling they're bringing as value to the table, to the organization. And there is, I think, a big disconnect between what those folks that work in the SOC do and what they see versus what the higher ups understand. And that's not just like at the CISO level, that's at the chief executive and board level. Mm-hmm. There's a big disconnect, and that also leads to morale issues and burnout and unnecessary stress. So how do you get everyone on the same page? I think it kind of goes back to the tech talk to business talk and being able to say this, open SSH vulnerability is critical. This is why it's important for you to understand and to say, oh, it impacts a critical financial system or Salesforce or whatever that would have a direct impact if it went out to the business. And that's business and impact assessments, threat and vulnerability assessments, kind of all tying back into that GRC theme of really truly understanding the criticality of what the business says is critical versus what you might think too. There's like a whole... We've come a long way in our industry, in our roles in cybersecurity, in around these types of issues, right? Yeah. I think early days, certainly it was kind of new for the organization I was at the time when I brought a piece of paper to the highest level person that I could in the organization, go like, you need to sign this and say like, you're giving me permission to hack into stuff, and I might see people's data, and I'm gonna act, I'm not gonna act unethically for that, and I'm gonna help protect the systems, but you need to give me permission to like basically do whatever I want on the network in the scope of my role, right? And that was like, we had to have some conversations about that. I feel like today, 20 plus years later, we're in a much better position to have those conversations, because most officers and boards are aware of cybersecurity in a certain capacity now that puts us in a much better position.
Yeah, and I think the recent changes to the SEC rules around having a cybersecurity professional a part of your board, I think is going to make that transition happen much faster for the companies that are kind of stragglers, where they only view security as a cost center, which I think we need to finally get over that hump as well, because security and technical privacy are business drivers. Customers ask for it, they demand it.
Yeah.
They expect it in certain industries as well, and without a security team,
in certain cases, you're required to do it if you want to do business.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about like the European market and the changes that happened there in the since GDPR has certainly driven that further. Same with CCPA and some of the changes that are coming in the U.S. But it's still looked at as strictly a cost center versus a cost driver and a sales enabler, and that switch needs to change. And maybe to your point, that will help to alleviate some of that unnecessary stress that SOC teams and security teams feel around, I'm understaffed, I'm overworked, there's not enough people to help respond, or not even just in the security function, but like in engineering, like, hey, I'm seeing something, I have no one to go and talk to about it now, because that team's been riffed, or just historically has been understaffed. So adjusting some of those hiring practices may be a result of the changes that are coming and have been made recently.
I think one of the biggest points of stress for cybersecurity professionals is, I really want my company to secure this or do this thing more securely, and they won't. Right.
Yeah.
There's a better way to put that, but you know what I'm saying.
That's very apt. Yes.
But it's like that's like a point of contention. It causes friction. I feel like it's a little better. I feel like regulations and certain guidelines and even PCI has helped make some of that better, because it's like, no, we have to do this. We have to meet this minimum standard if we want to do business with the U.S. Federal government, for example, right? If we want to process credit card transactions, we have to meet this minimum standard. And more newer regulations, I think, are forming to make that even more of a sticking point, right? Certainly it bleeds over into my world in firmware too, right? Those regulations, like, well, it's got to be secure before it enters the building, right? It has to come from the manufacturer. We need to know which systems come in.
Yeah, secure by default.
It has to be secure. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mandy.
Oh, well, I have a lot of comments. I'm loving the conversation, and a couple of questions, because for you, and coming from perhaps a non-traditional background into security like myself, when talking about incident response, the SOC analysts, and people who are really passionate about security on the whole, do you feel that it's because of not just a soft skill, but actual and internal burning desire for justice and for, like, could be for truth or for ongoing respect, or for being able to carry out the prescribed tasks with honor and duty? Because that's not always just in line with like somebody who's been in military, but those are actual qualities that are also very apparent, say, in neurodivergent community, among autistic and ADHD persons as well. But that same thing, like what Paul's talking about, that desire to have things done in a just way, or in a truthful and honest and consistent way, when it's being stymied, when it appears like it's being stymied by the organization and it causes a complete drop in morale. Have you experienced that? Do you see that? Do you see that as part of what is the ongoing that could lead to burnout, like you were talking about, that you experienced?
Absolutely, and I so appreciate that you mentioned the neurodivergent community, because God bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Because there's we've had wonderful discussions. I think last year we had a panel during SAD about neurodivergent skill sets and how they complement our field. And I think it's absolutely true. The individual that used to work for me had Asperger's, and mentioned to me just on their own that they were very stressed out because they were going to their counterparts in engineering and saying, hey, you have to do X, Y, and Z by this date to be compliant with our internal policies and procedures. And they just didn't do anything about it. They just were not interested. And then it made this individual frustrated. They went back and they, in JIRA on the ticket, hey, you got to do this again. Keep at it. Don't let it fall by the wayside. No action. Then it finally got escalated up. Still no action. And it just led, it kind of goes from, and speaking from my own personal experience, because I am this person too, where you go from just being frustrated to being angry. You're like, okay, now I'm being disrespected. Now I'm being kind of put into a corner and just not being heard. And that's me speaking there, not this individual. That's how I felt. And it does certainly leads to more of that mental breakdown of a breakdown, but the gymnastics, mental gymnastics to kind of overcome that. That's what led to me wanting to take the time off in July. I was just so frustrated of having to keep saying the same things over and over again and trying to get heard. But the neurodivergent community absolutely, I think, is a great fit into security. There is a level of attention to detail and skill set there. Not something you learn in a classroom. It's who you are inherently, and that need for integrity and justice and to all the qualities that you mentioned absolutely are a fantastic fit into this field, and we need to make more space in security and for as a line manager for understanding those needs of those people as well that come in and say, hey, or don't say, right? They don't have to say, but if you're noticing that, hey, Kayla likes working this particular way, or oh, I see that she's getting a little frustrated or flustered or whatever, insert any other type of feeling, and being able to recognize that in your people and being able to adjust how you communicate with them and adjust how you assign work to them maybe is on the line manager. It's your obligation to take care of your people. And I really feel like that's something that we could all be better at no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, I think understanding how people work and operate without, as a manager, prying into their health, right, is a fine line.
It is. I agree.
You may observe, I'll tell everyone I'm pretty transparent about it, right? This year, actually, I got a diagnosis of ADHD. Right? It took me to 40, 60 years old because it got worse as I got older. Okay, it just I reached upon I've always kind of known that I've had the ADD kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't truly understand it till my son was diagnosed with it, but so when it got diagnosed. But now, understanding more about it, I can recognize those qualities and traits in other people, and I feel like I'm in a better position to manage those people, lead those people who may have the same kind of ADHD brain as we call it, right? Because I get it, right? I get it, and it's both a super. I was telling Mandy yesterday. It's both super annoying and a superpower all in one, which is really frustrating on both accounts. Yeah.
I feel as line managers, we know I can talk to Paul this way. I can talk to Mandy this way. I can talk to Kayla that way. You already know that.
That's just a leadership skill. You have to have it. To be an effective leader, I agree. You absolutely need it. I
think as an effective leader, which I think we all want to be, I would hope, if you're in that role, it's recognizing why certain things are said or done or not said or not done and being able to adjust. So, I think it's a superpower. I can see why it is annoying as well. I haven't gotten any official diagnoses, but I've been very open and transparent. I have anxiety really bad. And just at Blue Team Con, I just got up on the podium and I'm like, listen, I'm medicated. Let's be honest. Let's have a conversation about it. I have anxiety. I've been on and off of meds since I was in high school for depression. And there are times when I'm just low and I just need everyone to leave me alone and let me do my thing. Or there are times when I'm great and I want to be super social and do things like this. And that affects how I work as well. And my managers, I volunteered it. Of course, you can't ask the questions, and I would never expect someone to. But for me to be effective, I have to tell people that I work this way and that I'm not flying off the handle. But I mean,
right. It doesn't. Well, I guess I think people don't want to talk about it in a workplace setting because they don't want it to be held against them. Right.
But then you're a protected class. Once you mention it,
Yeah.
you are a protected class from those types of things, which sounds really dramatic and sounds like, you're going to sue somebody, but it can't be used again. Is it? Yes. I'm not trying to discount that it's not or hasn't been, but for me to be effective, I know it works for me. It might not work for everybody else. Right. And for me to say, yep, I'm on Alexa Pro, which apparently they're called Pro Bros or something. I randomly saw it on like an InfoSec Twitter thing or whatever it's called, group, and I'm like, I'm on Alexa Bro or a Bro Pro. I'm a woman, but I'm on it. But for me, it was definitely something that I knew I had to be open and honest about. And I think because of that, and maybe you've experienced it yourself or anybody on the line, like once you have that diagnosis or once you recognize yourself, you can see it in other people, and you're a little bit more empathetic.
Yes.
For what they're going through, and you have that deeper level of understanding.
Another great leadership quality is empathy.
For sure. Yep.
Mandy, sorry, were you going to chime in there or?
I was. There's so many things coming to mind. It's hard to keep up. But I honestly, at this point, want to just kind of give a shout out to any of the listeners, and especially if anybody's thinking about cybersecurity, and really notice that a lot of times the things that make people fantastic at incident response, SOC analysts, working in those fields can come from things that are rough and are traumatic. So I'll say shout out to the people who grew up in alcoholic or addicted homes and happen to have been because of that, now have it into their neurological system to be hypervigilant and to be capable and adept at reading the room, doing this, adjusting here, going over here, being able to put all these things together, making it the most kind and useful thing that they can. And those who have chronic PTSD, those who, I am diagnosed, and I'm open on this, I'm diagnosed autistic and ADHD, and have complex, trauma background, and all of those things for even employers. I feel like the more they understand that being able to correctly support and adjust to those, like Paul said, superpowers. And in my experience, there are certain things that I have done and accomplished that I acknowledge are outside the realm of a neurotypical brain being able to do that. And conversely, they do things that I don't excel at. But it almost comes down to this very logical, simple thing in my mind of why is it so complex for companies to recognize that those things that could have a stigma are exactly the things that, if they are adjusted to correctly, also give you the absolute largest payout and therefore the greatest impact on the bottom line, on the dollar. And
we were talking about this, I think yesterday, Mandy, and it took me a long time to realize this. And I've spoken with some of my peers who also have ADHD, and they've said variations of this. People with ADHD tend to be really good at troubleshooting. And that's just because the way your brain works and the ability to go down different paths and have different thoughts, and be able to try different things. Our brains are just wired to do that, really amazingly well. I'm like, oh, it's starting to make sense now, because I feel like I've always been really good at troubleshooting. Like when you saw me earlier, when things are bad, and it's because the way my brain, now I know that this is the way my brain works. I know I can go with it, and you tend to be really good at coming up with a number of different solutions because your brain's all over the place anyway. Yeah. And so you can do that. And I've heard some of my peers say the same thing. Yeah, and
because you know it, you stayed calm. So maybe that is a trait.
I don't know. Staying calm is, I don't know where that I think that might just be
experience.
Yeah, it could be. Not that calm at home, I can tell you that much.
No, but I want to go back to something Mandy said. Well, first of all, like, thank you for sharing that with me, and obviously the audience as well, because I didn't know that about you. So thank you for your open and honesty there, your openness. But I think to answer your question, I think the reason why organizations haven't historically gone down the path of recognizing these things is because we are a very litigious society. In the moment someone says, I'm different, it opens them up to a potential lawsuit in some capacity. And that's a fear that our historically our organizations have always had, where now we are, in 2023, we've all survived a pandemic. We've all been through the horrific events of the past few years, plus all of the, well, really, if you think about it, since like 9/11, there's been, tsunamis and earthquakes and a pandemic and, forest fires all over the world. Like, I think everyone's kind of had their own experiences with trauma and tragedy. I think now everyone's just becoming a bit more empathetic to one another, and maybe that's starting to change. These organizations will start to say, oh, having like human resource groups for people, being able to support them, provide them with the type of whether it's technology or benefits of any other kind that can help to make life easier for our employees, or make life better for us, become more profitable. I would love to see the tides turn on that, and like leading the charge in the way that I hire people and have conversations with my own staff is what I'm doing to give back, and talking about it like this in this type of a forum, I think is so important as well.
For sure.
And tying that into SOC Analyst Appreciation Day, which is what we're here to discuss.
I'm glad you said that, because I was just looking for a tie-in for that. That's exactly where my brain went, Kayla.
I think it's we're going to talk to if you haven't heard about CyberMinds, we have a session with CyberMinds for mental health. They are a nonprofit founded in Australia. They made their U.S. debut at RSA back in the first half of the year. I spoke with them during Black Hat as well with their founder Peter. He's a fantastic person, so much fun. But we discuss mental health in their program that they're setting up to work directly with cybersecurity teams, and that I think is fantastic. And Devo is looking at ways that we can continue to partner with this organization. At Black Hat, if you came by our booth, we scanned you, and it was a $10 donation that we made on your behalf to CyberMinds. So if you stopped by, awesome, you contributed. And then I'm moderating a panel called There's a Seat for Everyone in Cyber, which also ties into the complementary skill sets conversation we had before, and how really anybody that has that inherent, fight for justice, integrity, honesty, those inherent character traits, or are a veteran or active military, first line responder, teacher, bus driver, could really fit into our field and help to fill some of these skill gaps that we're seeing in non-traditional ways and new points of view as well. So that's going to happen that day. We've got SOC hacks with John Hammond. I don't know if you've spoken to John before.
I have. Yeah, I know John. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's so great. It's so funny on my YouTube, on my TV. It's like his face. And my husband's like, "Who is this guy?" I'm like, "Oh, that's John."
He does have an awesome YouTube channel. His YouTube channel is awesome.
Yeah. My husband he's a plumber, so he is not of this mindset at all, but he sees them every day in our house. And Marco and Sean from ITSP, we're doing a day in the life of the SOC, that discussion as well. So at socanalystday.com, if you would love to have more people to attend and to learn from us as well, and us being all of us here, because you and I are co-hosting that day together, aren't we?
So you get more of Paul and Kayla.
But I will say, I'm a little disappointed we haven't had any dad jokes. Really, haven't been enough.
I'm light on the dad jokes.
You are very light on it, and that's.
I'll work on that.
Yeah, in October. You've got like a month.
Yeah,
it's October 18th. I want jokes.
Okay.
You get dad jokes. I'll come with mom jokes. I have a book that's mom jokes, and it says like dad jokes, but wittier. I'll bring it.
Yeah, the dad jokes don't go well with the family. They're like, oh, there's a lot of moaning and groaning.
Yeah, there's it helps to break the ice a bit, having dad jokes and what is it, rolling your eyes and what was it, Mandy? Scoffing.
Scoffing. I might scoff at the right time. Yes.
Well, that's great. I'm very much looking forward to SOC Analyst Appreciation Day. And what was the website again?
It's SOCAnalystDay.com.
Okay, so make sure you go there, register for that day.
Yes.
And you'll have a whole bunch of content to consume, and hope you enjoyed listening to the discussion. I certainly enjoyed the discussion. Thank you to all of my co-hosts and Kayla for doing this segment. And that will end this segment. So thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.